Okay, I'm Harry Weaver, your narrator. My t-shirt today is the guy from Duck Dynasty, and he says I'm a low-tech man in a high-tech world. Okay, my hat is about pounds, and it's because pounds is what I want to talk about. Pounds are used to measure weight, and when we talk about weight, we think of weights and measures, and it all has to do with, in science, they call things that have got weight mass. Now, I'm not going to get too finicky about, weight needing gravity and mass being if you're out in space, you still have mass and you don't have any weight because that's down a different pathway. What I'm talking to you about is what is mass? What is matter? And what's it got to do with us? Now, rolling back a little bit, everyone that's born on this planet pretty well, at least in my day, believed that they were encased in a body, and some people's bodies were fantastic at sports, and some people's bodies maybe not so much. And some people have incredibly piercing minds that were really good on all the tests in grade 2. And other people were kind of had to sit, at the slow table with other slow people. And they were considered by the, you know. Anyways, I don't want to go too far down that either. All I want to say is that basically we were thought of pretty well as beings that have got two parts, a mind and a body. And I'm not going to go into the spirits and all that kind of stuff either. What I really want to get to is what came first, the mind or the body, or do they come together? Now, most people on the planet, I think that the mind and the body come simultaneously. And I have been probing this, and I'm going to talk myself through this, all right? So if I get it wrong in your eyes, I don't want you to get a big frown on your face and say, you're wrong. I just want you to consider. Perhaps we were mistaken in thinking that the mind and the body appeared at the same time. Perhaps. Let's just say, for example, not necessarily true, but say for example, mind came first. Now, somebody might have said, well, actually, I think that the body came first because before you developed a mind, you started off as an egg and a sperm put together as a fertilized embryo, and a fertilized embryo really didn't have like a human mind. I mean, it's too small, like starts off as one cell, So it's really, no one expects that you're going to have a human mind in a one-celled organism. So I think that really what happens is that physical one-cell thing happens first. And then it divides and divides and divides. And sooner or later, much later actually, it starts dividing into little specialty cells that are called neurons and nerve fibers. And from this, we end up getting everything to do with, the brain and the spinal cord and all the nerves that connect to all the different parts of the body. And that's where we get sensations from. And all those sensations go to basically the brain, and the mind is resident in the brain. So that would be one way of looking at it. The physical organism came first, and then it developed into such an incredible instrument called the brain, and then the mind, and everyone knows that a baby starts off and it doesn't, a baby can't do calculus. It's, whatever mind a baby's got, it knows it wants to suckle, and, it knows it's wet and it's, it's cold, or, it needs a hug. But beyond that, a baby's mind really isn't, very advanced. And it takes a lot of years of education before it gets to have an adult mind. Now, so that was the one way of going, and I wasn't even go down that path, but I gave you that path, and that one is almost logical. What's not logical about it? I just, I'm a contrary person. I'm very contrary, and I like to go against the grain. So if it's logical that the physical came first, then I want to go the other way. I want to go, okay, let's say, for example, the consciousness came first, the mind came first. Now, how does that work with regard to humans? It doesn't work very well until you get into story time for girls and boys. And what I mean by that is in story time for girls and boys, we have people who talk about incarnation and reincarnation. It's a story for boys and girls because the scientists we had it, it was the cells came first, the one cell dividing into all kinds of millions and millions and billions of cells, creating a brain, and then the mind having to develop because it's educating your brain, creating a mind. But these other people that tell stories for girls and boys say, no, it's more complicated than that. There's incarnation where you're, maybe they might use the word spirit. Your spirit, I don't like the word spirit. It's very old fashioned. It sounds like something from days when, I don't know, in maybe like the 1800s when they went to a seance and then they were calling on spirits. It's a very archaic world. It is still today because people still believe in these spirit things. And I mean, it's cute. I mean, if you wanted to go and do Sherlock Holmes or something, you want to put him into 1800s in London, England or something. So it's fine for historical purposes, but for my purposes, spirits is just, I don't want to use the word, it's too archaic. I want to use the word consciousness. Consciousness. Because it envelops mind, and consciousness, if you're unconscious, everyone knows that, the body is just lying there and it's basically in some form of a sleep. You can't talk to a body that's unconscious, but a conscious person is wide awake. So you can talk and communicate with someone who is conscious. So, consciousness. Now, if the story for boys and girls that incarnation and reincarnation happens, how did I ever get on this topic? Well, I was very much a true believer in the first thing or the second thing I told you. The thing about, the mind came long after all the cells, the physical cells, developed. What changed my mind was when I had an out-of-body experience. And there was no way that in my physical science that I could explain how I had an out-of-body experience. Because if my mind is created by the body, and it's always been sort of located in the body, how could I have an out-of-body experience? So I dropped that idea. Now, maybe I was wrong to drop that idea, but at that time, I dropped the idea because I just felt like, well, whatever I am, at that time I almost felt like using the word spirit, because the spirit of me had risen up out of my physical body. I was, if me, what I felt was me, was not in the body, then I really quickly jumped to the conclusion I wasn't the body. And that's where I went with that. That I was this archaic word, a spirit, because my consciousness, everything that I felt was me, the me of me, was outside of the body. So now I know some scientists have used this because they've said, well, people that have out of body experiences, it's just in the brain has got mapping software in it, and it maps your consciousness to inside of your body. And if you have an out of body experience, it's just that the brain software programming in the brain has mapped you outside of the body. So it's just no big deal. It's just, it's a software issue inside of your brain. So, I mean, that's the issue, is that there's always somebody who is very smart, who can come up with an explanation of why, if I feel like everything I am is outside of the body, they say, well, I mean, your brain is still in your body, and it's just the brain programming has just decided to map what you think is me outside of your body. Well, I didn't have these other experiences, but I was reading a lot about out-of-body experiences. So this is secondhand information. For me, I didn't go far enough out of my body in order to do the things that the other people say. But some of these things, these out-of-body experiences, were like near-death experiences where people had died, like on the operating table, and then they were able to go outside of their physical body and go like outside of a window up onto the roof of the hospital and see that there was like a tennis shoe up there. And later on, when they, came to inside their body, they told somebody, and somebody went up to the roof, and lo and behold, behind the locked door that takes you to the roof, there was a tennis shoe. So, I mean, there's all kinds of these stories, and everyone knows that people love to make up stories, so maybe, it's not true. But if you put enough of these things together, it didn't happen to me, unfortunately. So I cannot say it's true, because it didn't happen to me. But I've read these stories, and, I just followed the lead down that way, a story for girls and boys. So anyway, it got me, because I'd read this idea before. The author Peter Russell talked about consciousness coming first. And there was people, I think they were in the old Sanskrit tradition, which is sort of pre-Hindu in India, the ancient rishis, very wise people in history, indicated that consciousness came first. But I didn't believe it until I had this out-of-body experience. And as I say, I've got all these other things that, could be used to disprove what I've said, if you were somebody that likes to argue. So all I want to do then is just give you this, that it may indeed be that consciousness comes first. Now, how does this incarnation into a physical body happen? Well, I mean, you could read all these stories about, the Tibetan Buddhists believe, I think it's at about the 42nd day of the embryo or the fetus, whatever it is at that point in time, in 42 days, that the spirit comes into it, it incarnates. And then, René Descartes, the French scientist, said that the seat of the soul is in your pineal gland, which is a little tiny pea-shaped gland. Some people say maybe a pine cone-shaped gland. I haven't opened up my brain to look at it. You can go on Google and look for the pineal gland. But it's a little small thing. Some people say, well, it's, where your third eye is. And that's where René Descartes, and he was a scientist from hundreds of years ago. So, I mean, maybe it was the 1700s, if I'm correct. I'm not sure. But I think it's 1700s. René Descartes said the seat of the soul was the pineal gland, not the heart, strangely enough. Have I given you enough to think about? What else do you need to know? Well, I still don't know about how this incarnation things happen. I mean, how does it that the spirit goes and gets resident in, the pineal gland, if Descartes is true? Now, the Mad Hatter, who did a video on my channel just yesterday, said, imagine that consciousness itself is projecting into this 3D hologram. And everything that we see in here is very illusionary. It is like we see things when we're here and they're physical things. It's like A mother gives birth to a baby. A physical mother gives birth to a physical baby. So everything seems, well, it was the birds and the bees that got the baby in there in the first place, right? So it's just one physical thing leading to another physical thing, physical thing, physical thing. But I'll give you the simulation hypothesis, and you can go and track that down. I've talked about that before, and it's the idea that it's like we're living in a video game. And if you are playing a video game, you load it up on a computer, and the computer gives you an image on a screen, and everything seems physical when you're looking at the screen, but everyone knows, well, it's just it's pixels on a screen that are lighting up and giving you the illusion of a picture. Well, could it be the same thing with us? That we're seeing things projected into a 3D hologram, and we're thinking it's something, and it's just because the way that it's set up. Our consciousness is projecting everything into this so-called physical hologram. And everything that goes on is a very elaborately staged game that makes it look like everything in the physical is creating everything in the physical. And if you're like me, you don't remember anything, I have one memory of when I was a very small child playing with a Fisher-Price toy. That's like the earliest memory I've got. I don't have past life memories. Some people say they do, but I don't. So where was my consciousness before that? Some people say, well, there's a great veil that comes over you when you decide to play this game, Planet Earth. Again, it's stories for girls and boys. I have no way of proving it or disproving it, but it's something to think about. I am Harry Weaver, your narrator.